My mother-in-law changed the message on my cake to, "Congratulations on 365 days of being a gold digger," took pictures of my reaction, and got angry when I revealed how she invented a problem to ruin her husband's vacation. I'll try to be as direct as possible. From the moment I met my mother-in-law, it was clear she had an issue with me. It wasn't just a matter of us not getting along or having different personalities. It was as if she instantly saw me as a threat for reasons I still don't fully understand. She seemed to view me as some kind of competition when it came to her son, almost as if she was worried that my presence would take away her role in his life. Instead of just letting things happen, she constantly tried to belittle me in subtle ways, and sometimes not so subtly. It was clear from the start that she had an issue with me, and that it wasn't going to go away. Now, if you're wondering why I went ahead and married my husband despite his mother being a nuisance in my life, well, it's because Cain has always stood up for me. Every time his mom tried to belittle or insult me, he was firmly on my side, telling her to stop. It's one of the reasons I felt confident moving forward with our relationship, even with her negativity hanging over us. He never let her get away with her offensive behavior and always made it clear that we're a team. My mother-in-law resents me even more because of this. The fact that her son doesn't let her belittle me seems to fuel the fire. For some context, Cain and I got married last year, and last week we celebrated our first wedding anniversary. Cain is the kind of husband who loves to dedicate himself to special occasions and planned a really grand anniversary celebration for me. It was completely unexpected on my part. I didn't expect such a big celebration, but Cain decided to invite all our friends and family and made sure it would be a memorable event. On the day of the anniversary, everything seemed to be going perfectly. However, there was a small problem. We got news that there was a logistics issue with the cake and it couldn't be delivered to the venue. Instead, it had to be picked up in person. The bakery was quite far away, and while Cain could have gone to pick it up by himself, we didn't want him to be away for too long since he had worked so hard to plan the party and wanted to stay to greet the guests. So we decided to reach out to our family in a group text, asking if anyone would be willing to pick up the cake for us. We were even prepared to compensate them for the trouble since the bakery was quite far from where we were hosting the party. Surprisingly, my mother-in-law offered to help. She assured us that she'd take care of it and would make sure the cake arrived at the party safely. Given our history, I was a little surprised by her offer, but I thanked her for volunteering. When the time came and the party was in full swing, my mother-in-law arrived with the cake. She placed it on the table, and since everything seemed to be going well at the moment, neither Cain nor I thought to check the cake immediately. We were busy greeting guests, chatting, and just enjoying the celebration. We simply trusted that the cake was in good condition, as my mother-in-law had promised. When it was finally time to cut the cake, my mother-in-law seemed strangely eager to participate in the moment. She excitedly told everyone that she wanted to reveal the cake herself, which I found odd, but didn't think too much of it. However, what followed left me speechless. She revealed the cake, and written in bold, mocking letters were the words, "Congratulations on 365 days of being a gold digger." Cain and I were completely shocked, just staring at the cake, confused and unsure if we were reading it right. The room, which had been filled with smiles and laughter moments earlier, suddenly went silent. Everyone else was equally shocked, their expressions changing from excitement to discomfort at the sight of the cruel message. Without missing a beat, my mother-in-law grabbed her phone and immediately took a picture of our faces, as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. She then burst out laughing, completely unfazed by the tension she had just created. Cain, visibly upset, asked what the hell she was doing. I could see the anger rising in him as he tried to understand how his own mother could think this situation was funny. At first, my mother-in-law casually brushed it off, saying she just wanted to see our reaction when we read the cake. But Cain pressed her, asking if she had intentionally had that written on the cake, and if so, what it meant. That's when she shrugged and said, "Oh, come on. It's just a cake. You and your wife are so tense. Relax. I just wanted to have some fun. I thought it would be funny to put that message on the cake." I was completely humiliated at that point. I couldn't believe she would do something so malicious, especially at an event that was supposed to celebrate our marriage. I asked her directly, who exactly was that supposed to be funny for? Because no one here seemed to be laughing. Still trying to downplay the situation, She rolled her eyes and insisted I was overreacting, making it seem like I was the problem. She said I was turning a light situation into something bigger than it needed to be. According to her, the message on the cake was just a joke, a harmless prank aimed at me, but standing there with everyone watching, I could tell no one else saw it as a joke. It was a cruel attempt at humiliation disguised as fun. My husband, clearly furious but trying to remain calm, turned to his mother and asked why she would do something so hurtful. Without hesitation, my mother-in-law said something that left me absolutely shocked. She said, "Well, I can't be the only one who thinks of her as a gold digger. After all, she comes from a poor family and married into a rich family. I meant it as a joke, so don't get so upset about it." Now I was completely horrified. I gasped audibly, and I could feel my face burning with shame. I had never felt so humiliated, so exposed. It was as if she had destroyed every ounce of dignity I had in front of our friends and family. I couldn't believe she actually said that out loud. For a moment, I was completely speechless, unsure whether to cry or leave. But before I could process her words, Cain intervened. Without missing a beat, he told his mother that she had crossed the line and needed to apologize immediately. His voice was firm, and it was clear that he wouldn't tolerate any more disrespect. He told her she had said too much, and if she didn't apologize to me, he would have no choice but to ask her to leave our house. I could see the expression on my mother-in-law's face harden as Cain stood his ground. She mocked him, acting as though his reaction was completely irrational. She looked around the room, clearly trying to gauge the reactions of the guests, before dramatically gesturing and saying, "Oh, come on, Cain, you can't be serious about kicking me out over something so silly?" Her nonchalance only made things worse. Everyone in the room could feel the tension building, and it was becoming clearer by the second that this wasn't some petty issue. It was a direct attack on me disguised as a joke, and my husband wasn't going to let her get away with it. But she acted as if she was untouchable, thinking that Cain wouldn't dare ask her to leave in front of all our friends and family. But I could see in Cain's eyes that he was serious. He wasn't going to let her keep humiliating me, no matter how hard she tried to disguise it. Moreover, I was done. At that moment, I stood by my husband and told my mother-in-law that she needed to apologize right then and there or she would have to leave our party. Instead of showing any remorse, my mother-in-law just rolled her eyes and said, "Okay, now this is getting too dramatic. Let's just drop this whole thing. We don't even need to cut the cake. If you're so upset about it." Her nonchalance only made me angrier. I scoffed and reminded her that this was our wedding anniversary cake, a cake that Cain had carefully arranged to celebrate a special milestone in our marriage. This was supposed to be our moment, and she had hijacked it with a message that was completely inappropriate and offensive. And to make matters worse, she was now acting like it wasn't a big deal, refusing to take responsibility for it. I pointed all of this out to her, making it clear that she had crossed a serious line. At that moment, my mom and sister, who had been watching everything unfold, stepped in to support me. They told my mother-in-law politely but firmly that what she had done was far from funny. It was deeply disrespectful and offensive to me and, by extension, to Cain. My mother-in-law, who clearly started feeling cornered, acted even more defensively. She dramatically turned to the rest of the guests and asked if they really thought she had done something that terrible. Some of the guests, thankfully, expressed their support for us. They agreed that what she had done was inappropriate, and I think hearing their reactions made her even angrier. You could see her frustration growing as she realized she wasn't going to get the validation she had been hoping for. Finally, she rolled her eyes again and turned to me with an exaggerated sigh. She said, "Fine, you want an apology? I'll give you one." But her apology was far from genuine. It was half-hearted at best, and after murmuring a weak apology for writing the message on the cake, she immediately followed it up with more insults. She added that I needed to stop making a mountain out of a molehill over a cake, and if I had let it go, we could have laughed about this joke in the future. But my hypersensitivity ruined everything. It wasn't an apology. It was just another way for her to dismiss my feelings and make me feel small in front of everyone. She wasn't truly sorry. She was just trying to save face and continue making me feel like I was the problem. It was infuriating. At that moment, I was beyond frustrated and hurt. Then I said exactly what I had been holding back for a long time. I reminded her, in front of everyone, that she needed to grow up and stop making stupid jokes at people's expense, when she knew full well that this was one of the biggest reasons her marriage had fallen apart, that this was why Fu had finally left her just 2 months ago. To provide context, my mother-in-law has a long history of making thoughtless and unpleasant jokes at the expense of her family. Earlier this year, Fu had gone on his annual vacation with 2 of his best friends from high school, something they had done for years. It was a simple trip, nothing extravagant, just a chance for the 3 of them to relax, catch up, and enjoy each other's company. These trips were special to Fu because he only saw his friends once a year, and it was a time he cherished. I had heard from Cain that over the years, my mother-in-law had the habit of making jokes to try to get Fu to come home quickly, even when there was no real reason for him to rush back. He had warned her multiple times to stop, and there was even a time when Fu threatened to leave if she continued with these jokes. For a while, she backed off, but then, this year, she crossed the line again. Just before Fu's vacation, my mother-in-law caught the flu. Fu was genuinely concerned about her and offered to cancel his trip, but since the tickets were non-refundable and Cain and I had promised to look after her while he was away, she insisted that he go on the trip with his friends. Fu even told her he would keep his phone on him at all times and that she could call him if there was an emergency. He wanted to enjoy the trip but also make sure his mother was comfortable while he was gone. Despite all of this, my mother-in-law pulled off her most outrageous prank yet. Not even 2 days after Fu left for his vacation, my mother-in-law called him in the middle of the night, completely hysterical, hyperventilating and saying she was experiencing all the symptoms of a heart attack. Fu, understandably terrified, urged her to call 911 immediately, but instead of doing that, my mother-in-law started talking about how much she loved him and how, if she died that night, he shouldn't suffer too much and should move on with his life. Fu was in complete panic at this point, thinking he was about to lose his wife, and he immediately called us to check on her as quickly as possible. He was so concerned that he said he was booking the first flight back home without a second thought. Cain and I were alarmed by Fu's panic, so we immediately called my mother-in-law to let her know we would call 911 to make sure she got the medical attention she needed. But instead of agreeing to get help, my mother-in-law continued to act as though she was gravely ill, insisting that we come to her first before calling the emergency services. It seemed suspicious, but given the situation, we couldn't take any chances, so we rushed to her house, fearing the worst. When we arrived, we were absolutely shocked by what we found. She was perfectly fine, relaxing on the couch, eating chips and watching TV, as if nothing had happened. Cain and I were stunned, standing there, incredulous. When she saw the look on our faces, she began laughing, as if it were all one big joke. She casually told us that it had all been a prank, that she wanted to test if Fu still loved her enough to drop everything and rush home for her. Cain and I were furious. We couldn't believe she had faked a medical emergency, especially something as serious as a heart attack, just to get attention. We immediately called Fu to stop him from interrupting his vacation, but it was too late. Fu, who had been terrified of losing his wife, had already boarded his flight and was on his way home. It wasn't until he landed and heard the voice messages we had left explaining that she was fine and that everything had been a sick prank that he realized the truth. He was devastated, exhausted, and angry when he realized he had rushed back for nothing, manipulated by my mother-in-law's need for validation. That prank had hurt Fu deeply and was the final nail in the coffin of their marriage. He couldn't stand her constant games anymore, especially when they involved something as serious as his love and concern for her health. To sum it up, Fu and my mother-in-law had an explosive argument after the disastrous prank, and it finally led Fu to ask for a divorce. The next day, Fu packed his bags and moved out, refusing to interact with my mother-in-law unless it was strictly related to the divorce process. My mother-in-law, of course, couldn't accept any responsibility for the separation. Instead, she started playing the victim, telling everyone that Fu had left her out of nowhere and that maybe he was going through some kind of midlife crisis. Cain and I knew the truth, but we decided to stay out of it. This wasn't our fight, and frankly, we had enough to worry about without getting involved in their divorce drama. However, now that my mother-in-law had publicly humiliated me at our anniversary party, I had finally reached my limit. I thought it was time for someone to confront her and teach her a lesson, so I didn't hold back. I told her, in front of everyone, that it was obvious she hadn't learned her lesson after Fu left her. I reminded her how her thoughtless jokes had literally pushed her husband away. She stood there, stunned, as I exposed everything. I told her it wasn't just about a cake with an offensive message, but her complete lack of respect for other people's feelings. She had ruined her own marriage because of this, and now she was trying to ruin my birthday with the same kind of cruelty. She kept being a nuisance, playing the same childish games that had destroyed her own marriage. I openly told her she was acting like an immature child and needed to grow up. The room went completely silent after I said that. My mother-in-law stammered, embarrassed, and for the first time didn't have a sarcastic response. I think hearing the truth about her own actions and being confronted with the consequences of her behavior in front of everyone hit her harder than she expected. She gestured for me to stop, but I wasn't going to let her off the hook. I told her that if she insisted on acting like a child, she needed to be punished like one. I went on to say that if she didn't change her behavior, I would cut off all contact with her and make sure our future children would have nothing to do with her. Hearing this, I could see some of the guests around us stifling their laughter as I scolded her, as if I were reprimanding a child, which only seemed to enrage her even more. Her face turned red with anger as she realized that not only had she lost control of the situation, but she had also become the object of ridicule. She glared at me with anger in her eyes, clearly furious, then turned and left the party without saying another word. Seeing her leave felt like a small victory, but it also left me thinking that maybe this wasn't over. My mother-in-law had been put in her place, but knowing her, this wouldn't be the last time she tried to cause trouble. However, for now, Cain and I had held our ground, and that was what mattered. We were a team, and we didn't let her intimidate us. Needless to say, no one at the party defended my mother-in-law after she left. In fact, everyone felt she got exactly what she deserved. People saw her for who she really was, and it was clear that her actions had crossed the line. Cain threw the cake away, and we continued with our celebration, not thinking twice about my mother-in-law. However, since that party, she has been calling me non-stop, demanding that I apologize to her for humiliating her in front of everyone. She has gone as far as threatening to sue me for defamation, now that the story has spread and people have criticized her for lying about the reason for her divorce with Fu. She says I had no right to share such private information about her life and that she's disgusted with me. Honestly, it's ridiculous. She has no grounds to stand on, and it's clear this is just another one of her desperate attempts to flip the narrative and play the victim once again. I spoke the truth, and the truth is not defamation. She humiliated herself by making that cruel scene, and now she's scrambling to save face. Cain and I know there is no legal basis for her threat, and frankly, I'm not going to let her intimidate me into backing down. But I'm tired of playing her games. If she wants to turn this into a legal battle, she'll only embarrass herself even more. But I doubt she'll go that far. This is just another one of her attempts to intimidate and manipulate, and it's not going to work this time. Update to answer some of your questions. First, yes, my mother-in-law has a history of playing tricks on us, even before this latest disaster. One example that really stuck with me was what she did on our wedding day. While I was getting my hair and makeup done, my mother-in-law stole my wedding dress and hid it somewhere. I didn't realize it at first, but as the clock ticked closer to the ceremony and I still hadn't put on the dress, I started to panic. I was in full crisis mode, frantically searching for the dress. It wasn't until I had a mini breakdown that she finally returned my dress, laughing at me like it was the funniest joke in the world. At the time, I remember thinking that was incredibly strange and cruel, especially on such an important day. Playing a trick like that on me, but then I attributed it to my mother-in-law just being her strange, insensitive self. After all, she and I weren't particularly close, so I thought that was just how she operated. Although looking back, I can't believe I let it slide. I really thought she could change after Fu left her. I assumed that going through such a painful experience would make her reflect on her behavior and maybe mature a little, but clearly, I was wrong. Despite everything that happened, she's still the same. She hasn't learned anything from the end of her marriage and continued treating serious situations as opportunities for her twisted amusement. Secondly, if she had put something else on the cake, I could have ignored it as a poorly thought-out joke, but the fact that she chose to write "gold digger" went beyond inappropriate. It hit me because it's not just an insult, it's an attack on my character and my relationship with Cain. Of course, Cain is wealthier than I am, but that doesn't mean I trapped him into marrying me just because he has more money than I do. We dated for a long time before deciding to marry, and our relationship is built on love and mutual respect, not financial gain. I love Cain for who he is as a person, not for what he can provide for me. Having my mother-in-law insinuating the opposite wasn't just disrespectful, it was deeply painful. It shows how out of touch she is and how warped her sense of humor has become. She's clearly so wrapped up in her own insecurities and distorted worldview that she thinks it's acceptable to make such an offensive joke at my expense, especially on a day that should celebrate our love. After this last incident, I really believe something is wrong with her. Her inability to recognize the gravity of her actions and the impact they have on others is alarming. I think she really needs to get help, both for her own sake and for the sake of her relationships. If she keeps going down this path, she's going to alienate everyone around her. Cain had a serious conversation with his mom after she threatened to sue me. He made it clear that there was absolutely no chance I would apologize to her for what happened. When he said this to her, she had a complete meltdown. It was almost as if she thought he would back down or somehow defend her. But Cain stood firm. He told her she could be as angry with him as she wanted, but she could never direct any anger toward me again. That's when she tried to play the victim card, saying that I had hurt her feelings and that, as her son, he should support her. But Cain didn't flinch. He reminded her that he was my husband, and I came first. No matter what happened, he wouldn't allow her to manipulate the situation or twist the narrative to paint herself as the victim. Clearly furious, she hung up the phone without saying another word. Shortly after, she sent him a long text message overflowing with drama. In it, she lamented how she had given birth to him and sacrificed so much to bring him into this world. She claimed that despite everything she had done for him, he continued to disrespect her. It was exhausting to read, as it was a guilt and manipulation show. After he didn't respond to her message, she left me several voicemails claiming that I was alienating her son during such a difficult time in her life. She insisted that all I needed to do was keep quiet about the prank she pulled. Once again, she accused me of being a gold digger, suggesting that this had been my plan all along, to separate Cain from his family so I could have him all to myself. She threatened to expose me for who I really am. Honestly, at this point, she seems crazy. Both Cain and I realize that her refusal to acknowledge her own behavior and her attempts to manipulate us are just further evidence of how toxic this situation has become. Let's just say I'm really glad my husband is committed to setting boundaries, and I couldn't be more grateful for his support. Together, we're determined not to let her toxic behavior tear us apart. It's been 3 months since our last update. Cain and I officially have no contact with his mother after her relentless harassment for weeks. We felt like we had no choice, though it's unfortunate it had to come to this point, but she clearly isn't able to understand the harm she's caused. She never got the apology she wanted from me. Honestly, she never will. As for Fu, he finally found out about the cruel prank my mother-in-law played on me during our anniversary. He reached out to me after the incident to express his regret and told me how sorry he was that I had to deal with her antics. He shared that she had done similar things to him several times throughout their marriage, which ultimately destroyed their relationship. Hearing this from him was both comforting and heartbreaking. It was a reminder that this wasn't just an isolated incident, but part of a much larger pattern of behavior that caused a lot of pain to everyone around my mother-in-law. Furthermore, her continued disrespect for her actions is one of the main reasons Fu can't attend our anniversary party, as he actively avoids attending events where my mother-in-law will be present. Currently, Fu and my mother-in-law are going through a bitter divorce, and from what I know, she's doing everything she can to make things difficult for him. It's sad to see his relationship deteriorate this way, but it's also clear that Fu deserves to be free from her manipulation and toxicity. I truly hope he finds peace soon. He's been through so much, and no one should have to endure the kind of emotional games she plays. Meanwhile, Cain and I are focusing on our life together, setting strong boundaries, and supporting each other. It's a shame that our family dynamic has become so complicated because of what my mother-in-law did, but we're committed to prioritizing our well-being and happiness.